The night sky was never the same again. For thousands of years, humanity had looked at the stars for hope, for answers, for dreams of the future. But on that day, everything changed. People all over the earth stared upward in confusion as one by one the stars began to disappear. First it was slow, like faint clouds covering them, but soon the darkness grew. The Milky Way vanished from sight, the constellations faded, and what was once a living sky turned into an empty black canvas. Scientists rushed to explain it, but no telescope could find the missing stars. It was as if the universe itself had turned its back on Earth. In the great cities, panic spread. Crowds filled the streets, shouting at the sky, praying or cursing the heavens. Leaders demanded answers, but none came. And then, when fear was at its highest, a voice arrived. It was not a human voice. Every screen on the planet, every phone, every radio, every broadcast went silent, and then a cold, alien voice spoke in perfect English. "People of Earth," it said, "by order of the Galactic Council, your world is banished from the stars. You are unworthy to walk among us. You will live and die alone. The sky is closed to you forever." The message ended, and silence followed. No explanation, no chance to plead, no chance to fight back. Humanity had been sentenced without trial. The wormholes that connected worlds were gone. The great highways of the galaxy were closed. Humanity was trapped in its own system like prisoners locked in a cell. Days turned into weeks, and the shock grew into despair. Space programs collapsed overnight. Nations that had dreamed of colonies and new frontiers now stared at a future with nothing but the cold isolation of Earth. Rumors spread quickly. Some believed Earth had angered the Council with wars and violence. Others said humanity was too dangerous, too unpredictable, and the aliens feared what mankind might become. But no one knew the truth. Governments tried to calm the people, but hope was slipping away. Humanity had been cast aside like a child abandoned by the universe. But in the shadows, whispers began to spread. Old soldiers, generals who had once fought in secret wars among the stars, spoke quietly of a man the aliens had once feared. He was not a leader of nations, not a politician, but a warrior unlike any other. His name was erased from history books, buried under lies and secrecy. But to those who remembered, he was called the God of War. Decades ago, he had led battles that shook empires. Alien fleets that thought themselves invincible had crumbled before him. Some claimed he was not fully human. Others said he carried a mind that could see war like a game of chess. Whatever the truth, his legend lived in silence, too dangerous to be spoken aloud. And now, with Earth abandoned, with humanity's future stolen, people began to ask, where is he? Did he die? Was he hiding? Or was he still waiting for the moment when Earth needed him most? In underground bunkers and secret bases, men and women gathered. They remembered the exile not only as punishment, but also as a challenge. They whispered of revenge, of fighting back, of proving that Earth would not kneel. And always their whispers circled back to him, the warrior, the God of War. Far away from the cities, beneath mountains carved with hidden steel doors, a chamber slept. Inside, machines hummed softly, old and forgotten by most. In the center was a pod, sealed with frost, covered with dust. Within it lay a man, silent, his face pale but unbroken, his body preserved in endless slumber. His heart did not beat, yet his mind was not gone. He was waiting, locked away until the time came when Earth could no longer survive without him. And now, perhaps, that time had arrived. The stars were gone. The galaxy had turned its back. The Council had cast judgment and believed humanity would break in despair. But deep below the Earth, in silence and shadows, the first light flickered on the pod. A faint red glow pulsed, like a heartbeat returning after centuries. The machines woke one by one. The air hissed, the frost began to melt, and the warrior's fingers twitched ever so slightly. The world above mourned, but beneath the mountains something old, something terrible, and something very human was stirring. Earth had been banished from the stars, but its God of War was about to open his eyes. The chamber was silent except for the slow hiss of ancient machines as the frost around the pod began to fade. For decades it had been buried beneath stone and steel, hidden away where no alien eye could ever see it, but now the time had come. The man inside, the one people whispered of as the god of war, opened his eyes. At first his gaze was clouded with the weight of long sleep, but soon it sharpened, cold and burning like steel. He looked around at the room, at the blinking red lights of old technology, and he understood immediately. He had been awakened because Earth was in danger. His body felt heavy, but he pushed himself upright. The memories returned like lightning. Battles fought in the void, alien ships burning, the cries of enemies who once thought themselves untouchable. He had been humanity's blade, sharp and merciless, but the Council had feared him. They had demanded his silence, his burial, his disappearance, because a warrior like him could not exist in their perfect order. Yet humanity had kept him alive, frozen in sleep, waiting for the day when he would be needed again. Now that day had come. Above ground, Earth cried out in despair at its exile. But down here a new chapter was starting. The heavy doors of the chamber groaned open and figures stepped inside, soldiers dressed in plain uniforms without insignia, the last descendants of a hidden order sworn to guard him. Their eyes widened as they saw him awake, his presence both terrifying and inspiring. One of them, a young officer with a scar across his cheek, stepped forward and saluted. "General," he said with a trembling voice, "the Council has banished Earth. They think we are finished. We need you." The warrior studied him with silence. His face revealed little, but his mind was already working. "How long have I slept?" he asked at last, his voice deep and rough from disuse. 50 years, sir," the soldier replied. 50 years lost to ice, but to him it felt like only yesterday. The world outside had changed, yet the nature of war never changed. He asked for reports, and the soldiers told him everything. The stars disappearing, the wormholes cut, humanity sealed in a prison of its own system. As they spoke, he closed his eyes, listening not only to their words but to the rhythm of fear in their voices. The Council thought Earth would bow, but he knew different. Humanity was dangerous because humanity could never accept chains. That was why they had called him the God of War, because he had shown the galaxy that mankind would fight with a fury no alien could match. He stood, his muscles stiff but his will unbroken, and said quietly, "Then we will fight again." The soldiers looked at each other, their despair melting into fire. The legend they had sworn to protect was alive, and his first words were a promise of battle. The officer handed him a small device, a relic from the past. It was his command key, a tool that once gave him control over fleets, strategies, and weapons that few remembered. He turned it in his hand, remembering the weight of command, remembering the victories and the losses, remembering the oath he had sworn long ago, to fight until humanity was free. Deep in his mind, he felt the old hunger return, the same hunger that had terrified the galaxy. Some called it madness, others called it destiny, but to him, it was simply war. He walked through the corridors of the underground base, past old halls filled with rusting machines, past soldiers who stared in awe at the sight of him. To them, he was not only a man, he was a weapon, a symbol that Earth still had teeth. At the end of the corridor, a great door opened into a vast hangar. There, hidden away from the world, rested ships. They were crude compared to the sleek designs of the galactic fleets, built in secret by desperate hands. But they were powerful, forged with human creativity and anger. Some were unfinished, others were scarred from tests, but all of them carried a single purpose: to strike back. The warriors studied them with cold approval. "These will do," he said. His mind was already shaping the first plan, a strike not of survival, but of vengeance. He knew the Council, he knew their arrogance, their belief that Earth was broken, and that was why his strike would be perfect. He would show them the truth. Humanity never breaks, it only grows sharper in pain. As the soldiers watched, he climbed aboard the first ship, running his hands across its steel as if he could already feel the stars waiting for him. His heart, once still for 50 years, now beat with fire. The god of war had returned, and with him returned the nightmare of every empire that had ever tried to cage humanity. Above them, the world was still in mourning, but soon it would hear a new sound. The roar of engines breaking exile, the first strike of revenge, and the return of the forgotten warrior who carried Earth's fury in his blood. The hangar roared with life as the engines of hidden ships thundered for the first time in decades, their steel hulls trembling under the fire of human invention. Soldiers rushed between platforms, loading weapons, fueling reactors, and preparing for war under the watchful eyes of the man they now followed. The god of war stood tall at the command deck, his presence a storm of silence and focus. He did not need to shout, for his very gaze was enough to command obedience. The plan had already been shaped in his mind, simple yet deadly, the kind of strike the Council would never expect. Humanity had been banished, sealed inside its system like a caged beast, but he would use that cage as a trap. The Council had built listening posts and outposts at the edges of Sol to watch for rebellion, to monitor the broken humans they had condemned. These outposts were weak, manned by guards who believed the war was already won, that Earth could never rise again. That was where he would strike. The soldiers looked nervous, for they had never faced the aliens before, but the warrior's voice cut through their fear like a blade. "Do not think of this as suicide," he said. "Think of it as the opening move. We will show them that Earth is not silent. Earth is not finished. Earth fights." The room echoed with his words, and for the first time since exile, hope lit their eyes. The fleet rose from its underground cradle, breaking through hidden tunnels carved into mountains, shooting into the dark sky where the stars no longer shone. The people of Earth watched in silence as fire streaked upward, a sight thought lost forever, and in their hearts something stirred, defiance. The ships moved fast, avoiding alien sensors, flying low past the gas giants until they reached the edge of the system where the first outpost lay. It was a massive structure, built like a fortress of steel and alien stone, bristling with weapons that no ordinary human fleet could hope to defeat. But the god of war was no ordinary commander. He studied its defenses with cold calculation, his mind weaving patterns of destruction. "They see us," a soldier whispered as alarms began to blare from the outpost, but the warrior only smiled. "Good," he said. "Let them see what comes for them." The first wave of human ships darted forward like wolves, their weapons crude compared to alien technology, but burning with precision guided by his strategy. Rockets streaked through the void, striking weak points the aliens never thought vulnerable. Explosions ripped across the outpost's outer walls, and in seconds the enemy was in chaos. Alien voices shouted in fear, scrambling to mount a defense, but the warrior's fleet moved like a living storm, every move predicted, every counter crushed before it began. The soldiers aboard the human ships could hardly believe it. They were fighting creatures who had ruled the stars for millennia, yet under his command they were winning. One ship took a direct hit, its hull splitting open, flames spilling into the void. But even as it died, the warrior turned that loss into victory, using the wreckage to shield another ship's advance. His mind saw possibilities where others saw disaster, and with each passing moment the outpost fell further into ruin. Then came the order that silenced every human heart. "Board them," he commanded. Shock rippled through the fleet, but no one disobeyed. Dropships launched, slamming into the alien outpost, and soldiers poured inside with weapons raised. The corridors became a storm of fire and blood, humans against aliens, flesh against armor. The aliens fought fiercely, but they had never faced men and women who carried the weight of exile, the fury of being cast aside. Every strike, every shot, every scream carried the rage of Earth itself. And at the front of it all, the warrior moved like death. His rifle barked fire, his blade cut through alien steel, his presence broke their will. By the time the humans reached the command center, the aliens were no longer fighting, they were begging. The warrior stood among the wreckage, his armor blackened, his eyes cold as stone, and he spoke into the comm systems of the dying outpost. "To the Council," he said, his voice echoing across channels. "You thought Earth would kneel. You thought exile would break us. But hear me now, I am awake. The god of war has returned, and we will never bow." The message carried far, bouncing across the void, reaching ships and world that had long forgotten the name of Earth, and with it spread a chill of fear. The first strike was complete. The outpost burned behind them as the human fleet withdrew, their losses heavy, but their spirits soaring. For the first time since exile, humanity had drawn blood. Above Earth, the people saw the returning ships, and they cheered, for they knew the old whispers were true. Their forgotten warrior had returned, and he had struck the first blow against the galaxy that cast him aside. But in the shadows of the stars, the council listened, and they did not cheer. They trembled. The council chamber was vast, built on a world of crystal towers and endless skies, its ceilings painted with stars that now seemed darker than before. Inside, alien leaders from 100 species gathered around a glowing table, their voices raised in anger and fear. Reports had reached them of the human strike, of the outpost that had been destroyed, of the message broadcast across the galaxy. The god of war had returned, a name they had buried, a memory they had tried to erase. Now it was alive again, and the council trembled. Some shouted that it was only a myth, that no single human could threaten their empires. But the evidence lay before them. Wreckage, transmissions, terrified survivors who had seen him with their own eyes. The oldest among them, a creature with skin like molten stone, slammed its hand against the table and growled, "You fools, do you not understand? This is the same warrior who once broke the Kral fleet in 3 days, the same human who destroyed the fortress of Drax, the same who stood against 1,000 ships and left none alive. He is not a myth. He is death walking." The chamber grew silent at those words. Fear rippled through species who had never known fear, their scales and feathers shivering. They remembered stories told in whispers of battles where entire empires had vanished when they crossed paths with him. And now he was awake again, not with the galaxy at his feet, but with vengeance burning in his heart. Another leader rose, its form tall and insect-like, clicking nervously. "We should strike at Earth immediately, burn it to ash, leave nothing behind. If humanity survives even a year, he will build an army, and then none of us will be safe." But others disagreed, afraid of what such an action would awaken. "Destroying Earth will only prove his words." One said, a serpent-eyed alien with a voice like silk. "He claims we fear them. If we burn their world, we show the galaxy that it is true. The council must not be seen as weak, but neither can we reveal our fear." Arguments erupted, voices clashing, claws scraping, tails whipping in rage. For the first time in centuries, the council was divided, not by politics or trade, but by terror of a single human. As they fought with words, faraway fleets were already on the move, rushing to strengthen defenses, guarding worlds that once felt invincible. Merchants whispered in the marketplaces of distant systems. Smugglers traded rumors for credits. And everywhere the same name passed from mouth to mouth, the god of war. The council's speaker, a tall being wrapped in shimmering robes, finally called for silence. "We cannot allow panic," he declared, though his voice trembled. "If he truly lives, then we must unite. No single empire can stand against him, but together we are strong." The words sounded hollow, for all remembered the last time they had united against him, and still he had carved his legend into their bones. One of the younger members, desperate to calm the chamber, leaned forward and asked, "What is he after? What does he want? If we know his aim, perhaps we can end this without war." But the answer was already known to the oldest among them. He wants freedom for his kind. He wants vengeance for exile. And if he succeeds, he will not stop with the council. He will tear down everything we built. Silence fell again, heavy and suffocating. In that silence, fear turned into action. Orders spread like fire through the stars. Watch Earth, track every ship, hunt every whisper. Rewards were offered for information. Assassins prepared their blades. Spies crept into shadows. But no matter what measures they took, the truth gnawed at them. He was already one step ahead. Back on Earth, the god of war was preparing for the next strike, while the council wasted time in arguments. He knew them too well. He knew their pride, their fear, their weakness, and he was using it. Even as the council swore to act, They could not shake the memory of his message. I am awake. We will never bow. Those words echoed in their minds like a curse, a promise of coming war. For the first time in living memory, the rulers of the galaxy trembled not before an empire, not before an army, but before a single human whose return had shattered their illusion of control. The skies above Earth had not seen such fire in centuries, and now they burned with the light of engines as humanity prepared for war. The hidden fleet that had once been nothing more than scraps of steel and desperate invention was now sharpened into a weapon by the hands of the god of war. He moved among the ships, inspecting every line, every cannon, every soldier who stood ready to fight. His presence turned fear into steel, his eyes burned with the promise of vengeance, and his voice carried the weight of command that no one dared question. Across the system, signals from scouts brought news. The alien armada was gathering. The Council had sent fleets from across the galaxy, ships larger and stronger than anything humanity had ever built, forming a wall at the edge of Sol. It was a noose meant to choke Earth's last breath. To the politicians of Earth, it seemed hopeless, but to the warrior it was exactly what he had expected. He stood in the command chamber of the flagship, the walls alive with maps of enemy movements, and he traced their formation with a gloved finger. They think numbers will save them, he said quietly. They do not understand that numbers mean nothing when their minds are slow. His captains listened, their hearts pounding with fear and pride. He had studied the Council's tactics long before his sleep, and he knew their weakness. They relied on arrogance, on the belief that humans were simple and chaotic, incapable of grand strategy. He would prove them wrong again. As the enemy fleets crossed into the system, their ships stretched like a shining wall of death, bristling with weapons that could crack moons. Civilian eyes on Earth watched the skies with dread, knowing that one mistake could mean the end of everything. But then came the order. Engines flared, weapons armed, and humanity's fleet surged into the void like a storm unleashed. The god of war strategy was unlike anything the Council expected. Instead of charging head-on, he scattered his ships in broken patterns, weaving them through asteroid fields and planetary shadows, striking like hunters instead of soldiers. Every ship became a blade, every pilot a predator. Alien commanders scoffed at first, believing the humans to be reckless, but soon their arrogance turned to horror as their formations collapsed under sudden ambushes, surprise strikes, and traps laid in places they never thought vulnerable. One alien dreadnought, a beast of steel that had destroyed countless enemies, was lured into the orbit of a gas giant where minds hidden by storms tore it apart from within. Another was crippled when human ships feigned retreat only to circle back and strike its engines with brutal precision. The battlefield was chaos, but to the warrior it was music. He stood at the center of it all, calm as stone, issuing orders that bent chaos into victory. His fleet, though smaller and weaker in steel, fought with fury born of exile. Every soldier remembered the day the stars vanished, the day Earth was cast aside, and that rage turned them into fire. Hours of battle painted the void with wreckage. Alien fleets that once believed themselves eternal now scattered in confusion. Yet even as victory seemed near, the Council revealed its true weapon. From the depths of the formation came the Leviathan, a colossal warship the size of a city, its hull layered with shields that shimmered like a second sun. Its arrival silenced the humans, for never had they seen such power. The Leviathan's cannons lit the darkness, ripping apart 3 human ships in a single volley, its voice a thunder that promised annihilation. Fear threatened to crack the fleet, but the god of war's voice cut through their terror. This is their pride, he said coldly, and pride always falls. He ordered the fleet to scatter, not to run, but to strike from every angle. He knew the Leviathan was strong but slow, its bulk a weakness hidden under its armor. He sent smaller ships to dart close, striking weak points in the shields, drawing its fire, forcing it to bleed energy. The battle became a dance of death, humans weaving through storms of plasma, sacrificing ships to buy seconds, to open cracks in the Leviathan's armor. Finally, He gave the order for the final move. One ship, old and broken, loaded with the last of their explosives, plunged into the Leviathan's heart. The explosion tore through its shields, ripping the giant open from within. And for the first time, the Council's greatest weapon screamed as it died. Silence fell across the comms, broken only by the cheers of soldiers who could hardly believe what they had done. The god of war did not cheer. He simply looked at the wreckage and said, "This is the first battle. The war has only begun." The galaxy would remember that day as the battle for the stars, when Earth, once banished and broken, shattered the Council's fleets and proved that humanity could never be caged. The wreck of the Leviathan still drifted in the void when news of its fall spread across the galaxy, and with it spread a fear greater than any war the Council had ever faced. Worlds that had once trusted in the Council's protection now whispered of betrayal, for if the mighty armadas could not destroy the humans, then perhaps the Council was not as powerful as it claimed. The god of war understood this perfectly, and he did not waste time. His fleet, battered but alive, struck again and again, not at the strongest targets, but at the weakest, slicing at the supply chains, tearing apart the trade routes, burning the outposts that kept the empires alive. He knew that wars were not won by brute strength, but by cutting the enemy's heart where they did not expect it. One by one, alien colonies awoke to fire raining from the sky, and the name of Earth spread not as a victim, but as a predator returned from the grave. In marketplaces of distant worlds, merchants closed their stalls early, frightened of rumors. In taverns of lawless moons, smugglers drank in silence, muttering about the god of war as though speaking too loud would bring him. Even the children of alien empires heard the tales, their parents warning them in whispers to behave or the human will come. The Council tried to hide its fear, sending more fleets, declaring that victory was close, but their own people no longer believed them. Alliances cracked. Old enemies questioned why they should fight to protect a council that could not even protect itself. The warrior had planned for this, for he knew that the strongest empires did not fall by force, but by fear that spread like poison. His victories were not just battles. They were messages written in the wreckage of ships and the ruins of once proud stations. Every strike told the galaxy, the humans have returned, and the Council is powerless to stop them. Yet behind the strategy burned something deeper, something more personal. For the warrior was not just fighting for freedom. He was fighting for vengeance, for the humiliation of exile, for the years his people had lived under the shadow of banishment. Every order he gave carried the weight of rage. Every plan was sharpened with the memory of stars stolen from Earth's sky. And his soldiers followed without question, because his fury was their fury. Weeks turned into months, and soon the war was no longer one battle, but a storm consuming the galaxy. Empires that had once looked untouchable now bled, their fleets scattered, their leaders hiding behind words and promises. Some worlds even began to rise in rebellion, inspired by humanity's defiance, daring to fight against the Council's rule. What began as a war to crush one world was turning into a fire that threatened to consume them all. In the Council chamber, the leaders raged and wept, but no plan could stop the man they once thought forgotten. They sent assassins, and he destroyed them. They sent spies, and he turned them into false messengers. They even offered peace, but he sent back only silence, for he had no interest in peace built on chains. The fall of empires was not sudden but slow, a crumbling of stone under the weight of cracks, and everywhere the same truth was clear. The god of war was dismantling the order of the galaxy piece by piece. On Earth, the people no longer wept at the black sky. They cheered when the fleets returned. They prayed not to the stars, but to the warrior who had given them fire again. He did not call himself a god, yet they saw him as one, because he had done what no one else dared. He had turned exile into power. And as the Council lost its grip, he revealed his true plan, the one he had carried since the day he awoke. He did not want to defeat their fleets. He wanted to erase the Council itself, to end the throne that had dared to judge humanity. His captains gasped when he spoke it aloud. but his eyes showed no doubt. "We will not stop until their seat is ash and their voice is silence," he declared. The soldiers roared in answer, because now it was not only war, it was destiny. And so the fall of empires began, not with fire from the heavens alone, but with the breaking of faith, the shattering of order, the collapse of an age. And in the heart of it, one man stood, a shadow of vengeance, a fire of hope, the god of war, leading humanity not only to survival, but to a future where no one would ever dare banish them again. The galaxy was broken, its proud empires reduced to ruins, its once unshakable council silenced by fear, and at the heart of it all stood the god of war, the man who had turned exile into vengeance. The wreckage of fleets still drifted across star systems like ghostly reminders of battles that had ended not with victory for the Council, but with their humiliation. Yet as the flames of war spread, the question that no one could avoid began to rise. What would humanity do now? Would they become rulers, taking the throne they had shattered, or would they destroy the old order completely and leave the galaxy to rebuild from ashes? On Earth, the people no longer lived in despair. They no longer looked at the sky as prisoners, but as warriors reborn. And in every home, in every city, they spoke of a future where no alien would ever dictate their place again. Children dreamed not of exile, but of exploration. Soldiers trained not in silence, but in pride, and the name of the god of war was carried like a prayer. But the warrior himself did not rest. He stood upon the bridge of his flagship, staring into the endless void that had once been closed to his people, and he thought not of triumph, but of choice. He had seen enough of war to know that victory alone did not make peace. If humanity claimed the galaxy through fear, then they would become no better than the council they had destroyed. If they chose mercy, they risked giving their enemies time to rise again. His captains debated endlessly, some crying for conquest, others pleading for restraint, but his silence weighed heavier than any argument. For deep within, he carried not only rage, but also the memory of why he fought. Not for power, but for freedom. The council, in its final days, sent envoys begging for mercy, trembling voices offering compromise, but he gave them no answer. Instead, he let their own people decide, and across the stars, worlds once chained under the council's rule began to rise, tearing down banners, burning symbols, declaring themselves free. The fall was complete not because the god of war commanded it, but because he had shown them it was possible. And in this chaos, humanity stood not as a victim, but as the spark that lit the fire of rebellion. Yet even as empires fell, whispers spread of his final decision. Would he sit upon the throne of the council and rule the galaxy with iron, or would he destroy it forever? The answer came one night when he addressed the galaxy in a message broadcast through capture networks. His face appeared, scarred yet unbroken, his eyes cold but alive with fire, and his voice carried across systems like thunder. "Once we were banished," he said. "Once the stars were stolen from us. You thought Earth would die in silence. But hear me now, we have returned. And we do not seek thrones. We do not seek crowns. We seek only freedom, and we will burn any hand that dares to chain us again." His words spread like a storm, and with them came the end of the council. Worlds no longer asked for permission. They simply walked away from its rule. The old order crumbled into dust, and in its place grew something new, the return of humanity as a power among the stars. On Earth, the people celebrated, not because their warrior had made them kings, but because he had given them back their sky. The black heavens that once felt empty now shone with fire from human fleets that no longer hid but sailed openly, exploring, guarding, claiming what had been denied to them. The god of war stood at the edge of it all, silent as he watched his people rise. Some called him a savior, others a monster, but to him those names meant nothing. He was a soldier, and his war was finished. He had given humanity the chance to choose its future, and that was enough. As he looked upon the stars, now open and endless again, he whispered the words that would be remembered for generations. Banished once, but now, We are the stars. And with that, the legend of exile ended, and a legend of humanity's return began.